Well, I'll just say I'm John Flannery, and I'm a journalist and broadcaster, and I do online radio shows about arts and also film and TV. And I have to say that Dock and Roll is a marvellous opportunity to combine both of those interests. And I have to thank Colin and Vanessa for yet again bringing together a wonderful collection of films. We've had some great jazz films over the course of this week and a half, and Bruce Spiegel, Bill Evans' Time Remembered, it is another classic. It's another wonderful documentary to add to that list.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well,
let's start with your interest in Bill Evans' music, first of all. When did you first encounter his music, and his the impression of that music on your life and now leading to the creation of this film?
Like all the things in life, I've been listening to music since I was a little kid, since I was about 7 years old, Fats Waller and stuff as a kid, and but you know, I listened to a lot of piano players. I was a big piano enthusiast. I loved Bud Powell, I liked Wynn Kelly, I liked Red Garland, and Bill's music didn't really strike me until I was earlier in life. And it was Everybody Digs Bill Evans, which was Zabiskie talked about. That record really had an impact on him, and it really had an impact on me. And once I heard that record, I said, geez, this is pretty amazing. And like somebody else, you start to seek out stuff. So I started just going out and listening to earlier records. And the records that I found really interesting were the early records. New Screen Explorations, the first Trio album, the Vanguard's albums, and some of the earlier albums I thought were they had such an impact on me. And then I read Peter Pettinger's book, who by the way was at this club in 1965 and heard Bill Evans in 1965 and wrote the book How My Heart Sings, which was a great book, by the way. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's a great book. And he was influenced by, but he heard his music in that time. So it was all of that stuff, and I read the Pettinger book, and I realized I really didn't know anything about Bill Evans. Even after I read the book, I knew his father died. I knew everything had happened to this guy. Tragedy stalked him around, but at the same time, I felt like I didn't really know him. So I started to do interviews, and this is what happened. You know, you start on this little quest, and this is what happens. So,
and we talk about passion projects, a labour of love. Just tell everybody how long this has taken to get to the screen.
First of all, I was working at CBS as a producer, editor for a show called, it's a Saturday night, you may have seen it, it's called 48 Hours. It's a murder mystery. But you know, week in and week out, I had to deal with this terrible moments that people strive, they lose somebody gets, so I had to walk around with this stuff on my back. So in order to keep my sanity, I would look for projects that interest me, and this project interested me, as other projects. It provided me an opportunity to keep my balance, you know. So because I was always in Murdy on my mind 45 weeks of the year, so this would give me a little relief from that work. And I started to go out, and I didn't really know if I was going to be able to do this record. You start out, it's 8 years, you start out, let me see if anybody will talk to me. That's the first thing. And so I called up Chuck Israels. He had written a nice thing about Bill's music, and he was in New York, and I said, could I come and talk to you? I said, okay, I'll be at the hotel. I took my little camera, and it was a little hotel room. I set it up. It was just me and him, and I set it down and I had a bunch of questions, and I talked to him, and I felt like he was just so. He just brought something to the table that I thought, boy, this is really interesting. And he revealed certain things about his relationship with Scott and his relationship with Bill that I thought were really fascinating. And it got the fire lit. And I'll tell you this one story. So that was my first interview. I said, well, I thought I was doing pretty good. Let me see if I can talk to somebody who's still alive that will still talk to me. And I talked to Paul Motion. And Paul Motion didn't want to talk to me. He was gruff, he was angry, he was pissed off. We want to talk about Bill, man. Oh, you have to talk about Bill. He didn't want to. He called me in February. That's what he told me. Call me in February. So I said, what's your number, man? I'll call you in February. Hey, this is Bruce. I'm looking. Oh, yeah. You still want to do? All right. Meet me at 6 o'clock at the Village Vanguard. You have 1 hour. And I said, all right, man, I got 1 hour. I went down there with my camera. He was a tough guy, and I thought, he came in with his little shades on, and he looked around, and he didn't even say a word. He just went to the back room, and I looked at my guy and said, oh, this is gonna be really rough, you know. He's not gonna say anything. And I set the camera up, and I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened that day. Something happened magical. He just started, first of all, he said, look, man, Scott knew Bill was doing drugs. He didn't like the fact that he was doing drugs. He said Scott and Bill Evans had a contentious relationship because of drugs. He said Scott was going to leave. He couldn't understand it. So that opened him up, and what happened is it just opened the floodgates. So he was able to talk about Bill in a way that nobody was able to talk about Bill. And I went out that day, and I said to my friend, I said, well, that's it. I'm doing the movie. I don't know if anybody was going to talk to me, but I'm going to do the movie because, well, he was great. And if I can find somebody that brings this kind of passion to the story of Bill Evans, I want to do the movie. And I started just, 8 years later, I started just going one after another. And people, with the exception of Jimmy Cobb and Eddie Gomez, people were really nice to me about talking about Bill. They wanted to talk about Bill. They loved Bill a lot, and they felt that there was a lot of problems with him and his heroin that they couldn't really share with people. The heroin kept him away from talking to people. So they just said, well, I'm going to deal with Bill Evans, the bandstand. He was an introverted guy. He didn't speak a lot. And so people looked at Bill in a different way with a little time passed. And a lot of people were sorry that they didn't engage Bill earlier on in the game. Chuck Israel said, I should have talked to Bill. I should have, seek Bill out. We should have more conversation. Bobby Brookmeyer was the same. Well, I was drinking and I was taking pills and I didn't have any time for Bill. And he was doing heroin, so we just talked. We passed by and talked, but no one brought that to me. So I felt very fortunate that I was able to talk to so many people that brought so much wisdom to Bill's life. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to talk about it. And 10 people in this film are no longer with us. Paul Motion, Jim Hall, Bobby Brookmeyer, Bill Evans, they're no longer here. So I feel very fortunate that I had a chance to share with them their moments in time with Bill. So I feel very, very, very happy that I was able to do this. So.
Yes, it's almost taking an opportunity at the time to speak to these people because, again, the challenge of producing a documentary. For example, we hear a couple of interviews conducted with Bill Evans. Were you able, or were you trying to get hold of more footage, or were there any more interviews available? Did he speak to the press very often?
He spoke okay. The one interview I had that was really Bill Savetsky. He was a good friend of Bill's. He was going to talk to Bill about doing a documentary about Bill. He was a poet, and he set up the tape recorder and he did interview her. He did about 2 interviews with Bill, and then he called Bill and called Bill Savetsky. I don't want to do it. It's too much bullshit with the drugs, and I don't want to do it. So he stopped doing it. But I found that in the interviews, I felt that I didn't use a lot of Bill interviews. I used some of the things he talked about as a kid. I thought were really important. But the earlier guys, especially when he went to Europe with Eddie Gomez, I felt like they weren't real. I felt like I couldn't get a real voice in him, and like Chuck Israel said, it's all in the music. So I let the music speak for itself. I thought that was more important. I didn't want to hear him pontificating about stuff that didn't really feel like it was that integral to his story. So I picked and chose wisely. I thought the interview that I used, which was from the Universal Mind, is pretty good because it's a young Bill Evans talking about how he was. But people get older, then man, they get all caught up in the bullshit. People clapping and hey, it just changes. It just changes who they are a little bit. So
and I think it's also balanced as well because you've worked in news and features and you've done documentaries that are kind of up to the moment. So in a way, as you say, this is a kind of very different project working over a number of years.
Yeah.
How about that balance as well in representing Bill's music? Were there particular tracks that you really wanted to show on the film? And again, having produced over 50 albums as a leader, where do you start in selecting music?
You start with what you like and what's important to you, and I hope what I like is important to the people that watch the film. I chose wisely. I chose the films that I cared about and that represented the essential Bill Evans, the beauty of Bill Evans. And this is what I was interviewing Paul Motion. I was sitting there, the camera was changing, and this was my problem. I was saying, you know, it says some of the later albums, they don't quite grasp me. You know, I was telling him the Verve albums and some of the later albums. He said, I find it harder and harder to find the real essence of Bill Evans as the years went on. And he looked at me and he says, "Why do you think I left?" That's what Paul Motion said. He said he was having the same problem with Bill's music. It started to get, you know, this is me personally. I'm not talking about for you. Certain people that have records that they think are great from the latter part of his career, but for me, it's the early records that do it for me. It's the records, Polka Dots and Moonbeams from Miles Davis. It's all this Scott LaFaro stuff. It's all beautiful. The later he played, and Eddie Gomez will talk about this. He was playing more notes. He was playing more notes. The drummers was pushing that thing, and there weren't big spaces between the albums. So that's what I found. I said to Paul. He said that's why I left. He said the feeling that he had, the initial feeling that he had earlier on seemed to be gone somewhere. And there's good stuff, especially some of the earlier records where he plays. He'll play an intro, 4-bar, 8-bar intro. That stuff sounds great. It sounds fantastic. But then the drums, the big boom, it suddenly loses the feeling it once had. So.
And of course, one of the important areas of the film is the fact that Bill Evans was taken on by Miles Davis. And I've got a great quote here that Miles said, "Bill had this quiet fire that I loved on piano. The way that he approached it, the sound that he got, was like crystal notes or sparkling water cascading down from some clear waterfall." And of course, the fact that he was in this quartet that Miles Davis took him on, which could be classed one of the greatest quartets of all time in the late 50s. So what about Bill's influence on jazz music in general, Bruce? How do you feel his influence spread throughout? Because it certainly changed Miles Davis's attitude and his way of playing.
Right. I think what's happened is Bill's generation is past. In other words, there's a lot of new guys, Keith Jarrett and Brown, Medlow, and a lot of these guys that have adopted his style and sort of adopted the way he plays music. And so I think in a weird way, the beauty that he brought to the music has been a little bit lost. And you have to see the film and really experience the beauty of hearing it for an hour and a half to say, oh, that's what Bill Evans was about. I mean, I have a record at home. It's a Moonbeam albums, and it's called Polka Dots and Moonbeams. And I have that record by maybe 15 guys. And every time I put that on, I say, well, nobody sounds like this. Nobody sounds like this introduction. Nobody plays the way he approached that song. He just brought a certain feel to that song, and I thought he's got something that nobody else has, and that's truth and beauty, and I think that's in his music, and I think that carries forth in his music. That's why I did the movie.
Well, Bruce, we've got a great audience here this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed that film. The applause at the end tells me that you did. I wonder if anybody has any questions for Bruce about the film and maybe about the way that Bill Evans' life has been covered by Bruce here in the film. So got any questions? Yes. Colin's just coming around with the microphone.
Okay. I'll wait for Colin.
Running round.
First of all, really enjoyed the film, and I think got some very good insights into the music from it. But there's for me, there's sort of a gap in it which I don't quite get, which is around that addiction. It sort of hints that there's some kind of demons in the closet there, but you never really sort of open the door and have a look and rummage around inside. Are you clear what the demons are, or is it something much simpler of just the chemical addiction?
If if Debbie Evans was here right now, you could ask that question to her. I've asked that question to her. This is a guy that was really smart. He was really intellectual. He read a lot. He was smart, and he used heroin his whole life. I don't know. I have to say, I don't know what it really is. First of all, heroin was very popular. It was very popular during the times. A lot of people doing heroin. That was part of the whole menu. And I think he was white. He was into black culture. I think that actually sort of helped him a little bit. I don't know why. And I think he felt generally pretty comfortable on the drug. Some of his best stuff is when he's high. I hate to tell you this. I hate to tell you this, but it's true. I find that later on when he played with Eddie Gomez, it's beautiful stuff. Eddie's playing all over the place, but it doesn't have the same impact as the earlier stuff. So I asked a question to everybody, to Gene Lees, so. In a weird way, the fact that he was on heroin kept him apart. So, it's like, you're a junkie, I'm only going to deal with people that deal junk. And his best buddy was Philly Joe Jones. And he used to hang out with him all the time, and him and Philly were good homies together. But I think with Chuck Israels and stuff, like Chuck says, they were shooting up in the room, man. I didn't want to have no part of that. I don't want to deal with that. I'm a pothead. I don't want to deal with that. So a lot of people were like that. It was a turnoff for them. Unless you shot drugs, you understood it. And plus, this was the other thing. He was borrowing money from people. I didn't get into these, but he would borrow money, and then he had kept a little book. He kept a little book, and when he got paid, he went to everybody and he paid everybody off. That's the kind of character it was, and it wasn't like a Charlie Parker. We just, no, he paid everybody off that he borrowed money for. But he would always ask for money because he was always broke and he always needed money. So. I can't really answer the question. I can throw out what people told me about it, and that's all I can do because it's unfathomable really why he needed to do that.
Oh, well, thanks for that anyway. But the music transcends it anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions at the back there? Ooh, sorry, come to you in a sec.
Thank you very much. I just was thinking back to it's 36 years ago now, and I was sitting on the table. The club was configured differently, and Bill Evans walked in on his first night of his last engagement here. And I was so shy in those days, I was unable to tell him how great I thought he was because I thought it would look lame. And then Pete King, who was Ronnie's partner, came out. I had this moment where I could have told him, and he went, and a few weeks later he was dead. So I don't want to compound the felony by not telling you how brilliant and magnificent I thought your film was.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And it touched me and moved me greatly.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I tell you the truth. I've shown the film a few times, and this is a great audience. But I feel like the film, especially when you see it live with a bunch of people, the impact of his life and how he surrounded himself with his music really has a force when you watch it in public and you sort of see what it was that he lived through. So I feel very fortunate that you had that experience. And the other thing is, I hope to show this to more people so that younger people that don't know Bill Evans, they get swamped with a lot of music. They heard a ton of music. They don't really know Bill Evans from anybody really. But I want to be able to present Bill Evans so that somebody says, "Oh yeah, Peace, that sounded good. I think Shinka should go out and get that music," because I think with the time limits are, people forget who the people are. All this great music. I mean, Scott LaFaro, Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, Coltrane. Unless you really know these people and experience the joy of sitting down and listening to Kind of Blue, you don't have no idea what that music is. Just a little thing, so you have to experience it. And I hope that young people will do that and experience, and that his legacy will live on. That's what I hope that's going to happen to him. So.
Well, I'll talk to you about that after. I know some.
Sorry, can I just ask my question? I just want to ask the question. thank you very much, and a personal thanks. It touched me greatly.
Oh, thank you very
it's
much.
It's a great use of the last 8 years, I have to say. But my question is, there are two obvious missing people from watching the film, which seems to be Nanette and Evan.
Okay.
And my question is, did you approach them to be in the film, to be interviewed, and is there a reason why they didn't?
I did approach them. I went out to California. I had a 3-hour conversation with Nanette. I'm friends with Nanette. I've recently friends with Evan Evans, and I talked to her till I was deaf, dumb, and blind. I talked to her, you should be in the movie, you should be in the movie, you should be in the movie. I also approached his stepsister, I can't remember her name now, the stepsister that he adopted. Maxine. Yeah. She didn't want to have anything to do. In fact, she told me, stop bothering me. Nanette, I didn't even approach Evan, but after spending 3 hours with Nanette, I decided that she just didn't want to do it. She was just too uncomfortable. She had a lot of bad memories. This stuff with him shooting up and being abusive was too much for her. And frankly, in 3 hours, she didn't say anything good about Bill. I hate to tell you that she didn't say anything good about Bill, and I got in the car and I said, man, that's good that she's not going to be in the film. Because I'm going to have to find a little good moment for her to put in the film, and it's not going to be there. So that's what happened. So, but she's very nice, and Evan is a great guy. I met him, we showed the film in San Diego. He was a great guy. He was humbled that there was so much of the film that he didn't know about. It was really, he learned a lot about his father that he really didn't know, and I thought that, well, that's good. And he's been a big support. And the other guy has been great, has been Matt Evans, Harry's youngest son, who's adopted the film and feels very strongly that his father committed suicide, and he's helped me to do a website, and he's helped me to integrate the film because he feels this is his family, and he feels connected to his own family. So everybody's been really good, I have to say, and Ned is very supportive. After we initially got over a little rough patch, she's been great. She's been really a wonderful person. So I got no complaints about any of these people. Everybody's been great. So,
shall we take one more question?
Hi. Yeah. I don't mean to sound boring as well, but I also really enjoyed and I want to thank you for making this film, which I think is a fabulous point of reference on Bill Evans, which I really hope lots of people see.
I hope so, man. That's my dream.
I wish I'd had it 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's my dream. I want to show it in New York at a theater so people can come in on the weekends and see a little bit of this and show it on TV. And it's going to be also, you can tell people, if you go to the website, BillEvansTimeRemembered.com, we're going to put it on the website so you can actually buy it and actually rent it for a day and a half or 2 days, and you can actually buy it so that you can share it with other people. So,
well, I think it really distills down the humanity and the pain of Bill Evans and who he was, and I guess that's what's really the most fascinating thing about him is this pain that he nurses, and through music and through drugs, and I also don't mean to belabor the point that the first guy brought up, and drugs were a part of the culture, at the same time, I would wonder, a psychologist might point towards his parents as a question. Obviously, I appreciate there's no real answer to the question of where does this pain come from.
He has some stuff in his family.
And his father was an alcoholic, it seems, and his mother who abused his mother, and he and his brother had to take care of each other, but they couldn't do it very adequately. I wonder whether you have any other reflections on his parents, because usually that's the source of.
Well, I mean, what can you say? His brother is schizophrenia, and committed suicide in his 40s after he had a successful life as a player and an educator. What is it? He had 3 kids, and one of his kids, Serena, killed herself too. So he's got a suicidal thing in his family. And who knows what Bill was thinking? I don't know. It kept him through. It kept him going through a lot of the patches. Who's to say, you know? But I think the suicide thing was kind of important that it's in his family. So you know, and Debbie will tell you that she can't even tell you like why her father really committed suicide. It's just something that happened, and one of he had 3 kids, and one of those kids committed suicide. So it's in the family. I don't know. I don't know what you can say to that. It's like part of the what happened in his family. So
We've got time for one more question.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you more about Peter Pettinger, because he's a very great friend of mine in time.
Well, I can tell you that I'm so sorry that I didn't get a chance to meet him, and it's particularly because I thought the book was so good, and I would recommend anybody to go read the book. It's a great book, and he's a musicologist. He was a classically trained musicologist, and he really dealt with Bill as a serious musician, and he talked about all the records, and I thought it was brilliantly conceived, and I take my hat off to him. I thought it was great.
Did you meet him personally?
No, I never met him. He had passed away by the time I started this movie.
Because of course he was a great classicist, and I met him. He came and played with Shandor Vague, the foundation of the International Musicians Seminar in Prussia Cove.
So he knew what he was talking about.
He knew that. He played with Nigel Kennedy afterwards. Interesting sort of beginning his concerts with.
I'm so sorry that I didn't get a chance to meet him.
But then he also, he was on medication, and he didn't take his medication, something like 82 or 83, and he died. Or took his life. We don't quite know, but it's.
Is that he took his own life?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. How old was he?
I don't know about his age. I think about 45, something.
Wow, I didn't know that. Shoot, that's a shock. Wow. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Bruce, we'll just sum up now and finish the Q&A. Did you learn anything new during those 8 years? Were you surprised by what you learned through talking to some of Bill Evans' contemporaries, his family? I mean, has the film really turned out as you imagined it 8 years ago? Has it evolved along the way?
I don't know. Every time I look at it, it has its own life, and I think it's there and represents a fair representation to what I did. I think the most thing that amazes me is that, number one, I always think about this. Bill didn't think he was a great piano player. That amazes me. When Bob Brookmeyer says he didn't think he was a great piano player. He couldn't get up on the bandstand with Miles Davis. So whatever voodoo was working for him, he just felt that he didn't bring that much to the table. He thought a lot of people were talented. They had innate talent. They were really good at the piano, and he didn't think he brought that much. So what he did, he turned that around on himself, and he worked really hard on the harmonics and the beauty of the piano, so he could get something out and he could forge his own land. I thought that was a pretty amazing thing, that he didn't feel like it was a good piano player. I think later on he did. You know, when all the hype stuff and the Grammys happened. But I think early on, when he was with the musicians like, you know, Coltrane and stuff, I think he was like, thought he was in over his head. So I thought that was an interesting little thing about him. And the other interesting thing is he was a nice guy. You know, I mean, he was a junkie, but if you talked to him, like if you would have went up and talked to him, and if he was okay, he would have probably shared something with you. Yeah. He was, I think, a nice guy. He was approachable. I think if you had something to say to him, he would entertain you. I think that happened to Warren Bernhardt when he played. He was just a nice guy, I think, and people responded that. Nobody said, oh, he was a shit, they didn't pay him. Nobody said that about him. Everybody said he was a great guy, and I really loved playing with him. So I thought, you know, he had a good history of his involvement with people. I think was great, and Paul Motion loved him. So,
well, yeah. Bruce Spiegel, thank you so much for bringing the
welcome.
UK premiere of Bill Evans' Time Remembered to Ronnie Scott.
And thank you all so much for coming here and enjoying the movie, and thank you so much for sharing this with me.